So today I'm going to take you on an adventure with two different families from Toronto, Canada to Florida. And this adventure takes place in 1914 in the month of November. Now, these two families have a lot of similarities. Both of them, their income last year was 75,000 Canadian dollars, roughly equivalent to $58,912.50 in US dollars. Now, to give you an example of how much money this is, with inflation, this would be equivalent to $1,317,283.50 in today's money. So they are quite well off this year. Both families have 3 people they're going to be traveling with: a mother, a father, and a daughter, and both are living in Toronto at the moment. Now, the biggest difference, which will be the biggest determining factor between the differences in their vacations, is their skin color. The Williams are black and the Lavoys are white. Now, Toronto in 1914 was just getting news that Canada was going to start recruiting people for Britain in World War I. So Toronto was the patriotic hub of the country. Wayne Reeves, who's the chief curator for the city of Toronto, stated at this time it was quite patriotic. And Toronto was actually going through a recession at this time, so not a lot of families were doing as well as the Lavoys and the Williams this year. The war and enlisting in the Army specifically provided opportunity to essentially get a paid trip back home to England. About 85% of the population of Toronto at this time, they were British Canadian. So they had emigrated from Britain to Canada and didn't get to go home very frequently. And so going off to war provided them an opportunity to go home. Now, if you were black, you were not able to enlist until later in the war. So the Williams wouldn't, Mr. Williams specifically, would not have enlisted, most likely in 1914. Well, he would not have. That's a known fact. Now, the Williams are a lovely family. Daniel Williams is 30 years old and a property caretaker. So he takes care of the land a little outside of Toronto, a large piece of land, and the owner of that land recently passed away, and that's how they came into their money. The owner who passed away gifted them in the will to Daniel that $75,000. So they don't typically make $75,000. Black Canadians at this time, even though the racism in Canada wasn't as bad as it was in the United States at this time, there were still effects. They most likely would have been blue-collar workers. There were not a lot of wealthy Black Canadians at this time. So the wife, Rue, is 26 and their daughter is 5, and they have decided to go on vacation this year in 1914. Now, their motive for vacation is Rue's sister is getting married in Florida, in St. Augustine, specifically in Lincolnville. And so they are traveling down to Florida for the wedding. Now, they would not have used all or a large sum of their income last year on their last year's income on this vacation, because since they don't typically make this sort of money, they would most likely have put it away for a long time and saved it up. So I estimated that I allotted them about 2% of their budget of their income on their vacation budget for this year. I mean, that still allows them plenty of flexibility for this vacation. So the Williams vacation is amazing in some ways, and in a lot of other ways, they have to go through hardships just to go and visit family. Now, their trip is about 16 days. The first day, they would have been traveling from Toronto to New York, and then New York City, and I have allotted them 4 days in Harlem. And now, blacks in America were not often able to express themselves very freely, but Harlem, there was this great Renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance, in the 1910s up to the 1930s, and it was like the height of African American, specifically, culture. There would have been great shows, and it would have been a very lively place. And so, since the Williams are traveling down to Florida and going through the U.S., I figured they had to stop in Harlem and have a really good time. Now, this would have been the most exciting part, I imagine, of the trip. Spending a good 4 days in Harlem. And then they would travel on the Florida East Coast Railroad down to Florida. And I wasn't able to find anything about segregation on the trains, but I imagine the other family, the Lavoys, who will also be taking the Florida East Coast Railroad, they would have been able to travel with more ease on that train. I don't know if the Williams would have even been allowed on the Florida East Coast Railroad. Mr. Henry Flagler is not known for his great race relations with the races, of different races besides white, I guess. So they would have spent 1 day traveling on the train from New York down to Florida. And then it would have probably taken, I'm giving them 2 days to go from the railroad station to Lincolnville. There would have been a railroad stop specifically in St. Augustine, but I don't know if that was just for white people, because it landed very close to Ponce de Leon Hotel, which would have been only for wealthy whites at that time. So then they spent 4 days in Lincolnville with their family. This would have been a really festive time for the family. There would have been great food and a lovely party, but they would have definitely stayed in Lincolnville. And they would have gone to church, most likely, at some point in time in their vacation. And St. Benedict, the more Catholic church, I have included this little lovely illustration. This image here of St. Benedict's would have been the location they would have gone to. And then the rest of their vacation would have been spent coming back up to Canada. And during their travels, they would have packed meals because, again, they would not have been able to, there wouldn't have been a guarantee that they could go to any restaurant whenever they wanted. So while they're traveling, they're definitely bringing food with them. Now, the Lavoys, on the other hand, they have a completely different vacation. Now, Luca Lavoy, he is French-Canadian, 30 years old, and a hotelier. His father was a hotelier, and his father's father was a hotelier. So there's no worry about income. He pretty consistently makes that $75,000 every single year. He has a lovely wife, Juliette, who's 26, and a daughter, Madeline. Now, Mr. Lavoy has been feeling pressure in Toronto, a social pressure to enlist. So although there was no draft for Canadians to go into World War I, there was a lot of social pressure. You were expected to go into war if you were an able-bodied male. So, now, Mr. Lavoy is French-Canadian. He's not super wanting to get involved in the war. He's feeling comfortable. So during this time of unrest, he tells his family, hey, let's go down to Florida. He knows all the top spots and the top locations to go and visit while they're there, as he is a hotelier. And when they are traveling, they are again taking that Florida East Coast Railroad, and they spare no expense. Again, if you're making $75,000 a year, You can stop anywhere you want at any restaurant, at all these amazing hotels and locations in Florida. They can really go, as stated, anywhere. I have this little picture of the springs right here. Springs would have had healing properties, would have been thought to have healing properties and kind of this gorgeousness. So they would have gone there maybe for a sense of renewal, self-renewal. The picture in the middle is of Jefferson Hotel in Monticello, Florida, and there was a world-class opera in Monticello, Florida, where they could have gone and had an amazing time, enjoyed the sights. And they could have visited the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park, and while in St. Augustine, they could also go up the lighthouse and see a beautiful view of St. Augustine from there. They could also visit Bel Air, Florida, where there'd be the Bellevue Biltmore, a lovely hotel. Again, no expenses spared here. They could have amazing meals, amazing times while they're traveling and while they're in Florida. Also, I am now just remembering when talking about the Williams, the last sector, we're moving back to the Williams here real quick, the last sector in their vacation, again, they would have been visiting that family down in Florida and enjoying Lincolnville, but they would also have the opportunity to enjoy nature because a lot of other things in St. Augustine, you know, there's segregation and the like. And so it's not always really safe, but in nature, maybe they could have a little bit more freedom. Okay, in conclusion, although these families both are from Canada and both are going on a 2-week vacation down to Florida, their vacations differ heavily, even though they have that same income the past year. Because of their different races, in 1914, it would have made traveling different as well as vacationing and the cultures they experienced while traveling and vacationing. Thank you for listening, and have a lovely rest of your day.